Hello and welcome to ThePrint. I'm Aamaan, and today with us we have Mr. Jaithirth, who is an entrepreneur and columnist. He writes regularly for The Print, and today we are going to discuss his recent article, which is on the Indian diaspora, which he says is now under attack. So, before we get to that, Mr. Rao, we'll discuss a very interesting point that you have made. That is the Indian origin people that are currently living in the UK, US, Canada. It is incorrect to say that they are the diaspora. I mean, the term diaspora is incorrect for them. So, could you please expand on that?
Yeah, diaspora is a Greek word coined at a time when the Mediterranean world largely spoke Greek, meaning dispersion, scattering actually. And it specifically refers to the Roman emperors Titus, Vespasian, Hadrian, all three or one of them, uh, forcing all the Jews or most of the Jews out of their homeland in Judea. So that is what diaspora is about. It is not about voluntary migration. It is when people are forcibly removed from a particular place. That is diaspora. And they are dispersed to a variety of places. So it is wrong to use the word diaspora to describe voluntary migrants, mostly who have gone for economic betterment from India to the US, Canada, Australia, UK, and other places. But you know how it is with languages, they adapt, they change. And today, this is the word that's commonly used. Indian diaspora, Lebanese diaspora. These are words that are commonly used, so we might as well accept it. But I just wanted to set the stage at the opening of the article that voluntary migration is different from forced scattering. In fact, the only Indian group who you could call as scattered or dispersed are the Indians in Uganda who were kicked out overnight. Some came home to India, others went to Canada, to Britain. They were dispersed, they were scattered. And they had lived there for several generations and contributed a great deal to Uganda. And yet they were dispersed in a way not very dissimilar from what the Roman emperors did to the Jews in Judea.
Okay. Now, getting to the main point of your article, which is that back in the 80s and 90s, you were saying that Indian diaspora was considered as the model minority, but that is no longer the case. So, according to you, what has changed and why?
I have made in my thing, they were a model minority. They were seen as relatively law abiding. They were seen as contributors. Most of them were taxpayers, and they were in higher income brackets. So they were adding higher value, disproportionately higher value to the economy. And in fact, when the British government, for instance, stopped classifying all people as Asians and started doing a little more refined statistical analysis, it became clear that violent crime rates among Indian Asians was far lower than among, say, Pakistani Asians. So Indians were seen as a good minority. In the US, they were particularly seen as doctors, scientists, academicians, business people, hotel owners, etc., contributing disproportionately to the country. Three things have happened, in my opinion, that have changed things. One is numbers. When you're 1 million people in a country of 300 million people, the US, which is what it was at that time, you don't count that much. And the few people you meet, oh, they seem to be good doctors, they seem to be good guys. What has happened, particularly since 1999, so now almost for 30 years, and the Indian IT workforce going in under the H-1B category legally has gone up to almost 50,000 a year. Now over 20 years, if you do 50,000 a year, that's 1 million.
That's a massive number. Yes.
And then if some people have spouses, that's probably 1.5 million. Then they have children, you're already close to 2 million. And then there are a lot of people in non-H-1B categories who are there. So over a 10, 20-year period, you can have very large numbers. I think Indian Americans now have crossed 5 million, or probably close to 6 million. So numbers matter. When you're 1 million in 300 million, you're not noticed. When you're 5, 6 million in 350 million, you get noticed. The second thing is the speed. If the same 5, 6 million had arrived over 50 or 100 years, I think there would have been less notice taken. Because people assimilate, people, get accustomed to it, etc. This has happened very rapidly. 21st century, really phenomenon it is. And only quarter of the century is over as now, so it's happened very rapidly. And speed makes a difference. The third thing is, and that might be a bit of a controversial point, I'm making that success which is initially appreciated can actually become an albatross, because then it does generate some of the oldest of human emotions, envy and resentment. So if newfound immigrants are extremely successful, then existing people say, hey, is there a conspiracy? Is there some reason? Are they helping each other? Are they gaming the system? How come they're so successful? So it's the same success, which in 1999 was probably a good thing, by 2025 becomes a bad thing. At that time, we probably had 2, 3 Indian CEOs among Fortune 500 companies. Today, we may have 50, and many of them are no longer just in technology. So it's not just an IT issue anymore. There's general Indian success.
So you could say
And
this would be one of the major reasons behind the
I'm not
H-1B.
saying it is the major reason. I'm saying all three are important. Numbers is probably the most important. Speed and success, which formerly was a plus, may now start at the edges becoming a negative. That's the point I'm making. And I've quoted, from a book by Gozali, the German historian, who talks about 1920s, 30s Jews in Romania. They're a very small number, 4.5% of the population. But in many cases, they would be more than half the doctors. So what did the Romanians do? Initially, they appreciated, hey, these guys are good doctors. They're helping us. But after some time, the non-Jewish doctors in Romania said, hey, wait a minute, they are getting too many. So they restricted admission of Jews to Romanian medical colleges. So many of them went to France and other countries and Germany and got some medical degrees and came back and practiced. Then they restricted any Jewish doctor who goes to France or Germany and comes back, he or she cannot practice in Romania, only non-Jewish Romanians could. So their success, in a sense, became a bit of a problem. And it was all envy and resentment of different groups. So I'm just saying that these things have happened before in history, where success leads to initially good things, and an excessive success, if you will, becomes a bit of a problem. But I'm not saying it's the main problem. I'm saying
One of
numbers
the
is the main problem, speed is the second problem. And I'm just trying to point out to my readers that something which was good at one stage in historical development can turn to be a weakness later. And this is true in social science in general. Confidence is good, right? Overconfidence is a weakness. So, you really, anything that is good, any trait, can, when exaggerated, become a weakness. And that is true in historical situations also.
Okay. So, in your article, you have given an example of two countries, which is France and Britain. And you are saying that these two particular countries show that it is better for minorities to be lawbreakers, to be menace makers,
Yeah.
than to be remain peaceful and follow laws. So,
It is quite clear.
why are
I
these
mean,
two particular countries, and what's the reason behind this?
let's take a look at Britain. I mean,
Yes.
it's now been known for more than 20 years. It's not recent, probably 30 years. Some people say even longer. That there is a huge mafia like group of Pakistani grooming, raping gangs in multiple towns in Britain. Instead of acting against them, the British state actually mollycoddles them. They're actually scared of the criminals. Uh, and it kind of implies to other minorities that, hey, if you become violent and criminal, the state will be scared of you. And then you can actually elect your own MPs. They do a lot of fiddling around with postal ballots. You know that. One guy goes and gets 200 people to sign postal ballots, and then he fills the names and puts it in. And that's how they are able to create vote banks and are able to create uh, wins for particular candidates who then are then beholden to them. And therefore, both in local elections and in parliamentary elections, and then they get disproportionate power. Now that is cheating. That's a criminal activity, going and harvesting postal ballots. But they do it, and everybody knows they do it. I don't think Indians do it in Britain. Uh, but you could make a kind of perverse case that maybe they should, because then the British state will be nicer to them. Uh, it's a kind of a horrendous idea to say you should get into grooming and so on. But it tells you that these soft and kind of slightly foolish states with very flawed governments um, really don't know how to handle minority issues with any common sense. I'm not suggesting that they be harsh, but they must apply common sense.
Or is it the same with France too?
France, probably less so, but certainly there is a greater concern about. No, France doesn't have any Indians that many, so we can't. But certainly it's true in Canada. The Canadian government is scared of Pakistanis in Canada. They are even scared of Indian Khalistanis in Canada. They are not scared of other Indians in Canada. So it's certainly true in Canada that these governments are somehow hesitant to act against minorities who are violent, and they don't necessarily uh, give great, which they used to 30 years ago, great admiration to minorities who are not violent.
So now talking about diaspora, we have to also talk about the immigration rules that you have mentioned. You have particularly highlighted that the immigration and the visa rules in the US, UK, and Britain, but in the US, UK, and Canada particularly, that they have many
Even
flaws.
Australia, they have actually degenerated over a period of, I don't know, 30, 40 years. Now, we'll talk later about illegal immigration. Let's just talk to the legal migration process. Now, H-1B was a good scheme to attract talented people to the US. And US has always been proud that they attract talent from around the world, and that helps in their industry, in their research, etc. But I don't know when or how they decided to make it a lottery. No, lottery is a very bad idea. They should have had clear criteria, salary criteria, qualification criteria. you know, and admitted people not by a lottery system. When you have a lottery system, you are automatically encouraging other people to game it. So, how do you game it? You apply for the lottery every year for 10 years. Who knows? In year 8 or 9, you may get in. And it doesn't mean that the guy who's denied is less qualified than you. He may be more qualified than you. Because you set up a baseline of qualifications and say everyone now can apply. So the US kind of hurt itself by going for the lottery scheme instead of going for a much more rational guest worker scheme that actually many people, including myself, advised US government officials to think of that. But they just dismissed it, and somehow lottery, if you're of a leftist socialist kind of mind, lottery sounds fair. For them, fairness is important, not merit or qualification, but fairness. Fairness means even the less merited person should get a chance. So they went in for lottery. And I think that has not been good. In fact, even though everybody's been a little shocked at $100,000 fees and being announced so suddenly, at least it's a move towards the market. Therefore, I'm not too upset about it, because if you get a 3-year visa and the employer pays 100,000, amortized over 3 years, that is $33,000 per year of cost, and if it's 6 years, it's only $70,000 per year cost. And an employer should be able to afford that if the employer wants a talented person. So moving away from lottery towards the market. This is not perfect. They can come up with a better reverse auction process. And they have the best economists in the world who've done work on auction theory. So they can come up with a better auction process. But anyway, at least it's the right move. But it's taken them 30 years, 40 years to figure this out, that lottery is not a good idea. And, it's so kind of made up where you can have firms that are purely people supplying firms. They are not doing any software or any work. They're just supplying to other companies. They can also bid in the lottery. So you've just created a situation where the original intent of the H-1B is getting grossly violated. And obviously that leads to a lot of criticism that will lead to a backlash. Now, Canada is a downside worse. The Canadian government openly advertised, come here as students and then you can become residents. And they sent extremely left-wing socialist officials to the Canadian embassy in Delhi and Chandigarh, who knew full well that these people were not going there to study. They were going in order to become residents. And this was a racket, and this was really people trafficking. And dozens and dozens of colleges opened up, fly-by-night colleges with one room or with one website, but no activity in Canada. And they started giving admissions to students, bogus students. And they went. And it was almost as if that part of the Canadian bureaucracy wanted to create a large number of migrants into Canada without proper assessments of their merits or their abilities to contribute to Canadian society or to the Canadian economy. And by the way, the Canadian press is a joke, you know that. It's entirely subsidized by the Canadian government. It's not a free press. The only people who brought this up were some Indian internet fellows and Indian journalists and so on. And they were ignored. They said, hey, this is a racket. People, I've even read, it's tragic that some of these people traffickers who are taking women students there, they're actually in some kind of sex trafficking business. These are not students in the original sense that people went to a McGill or a, great Canadian university to do a PhD in electrical engineering. No, that's not what these guys are. These guys are going to fly-by-night colleges for bogus degrees, diplomas, eventually to become Canadian residents and citizens. And this has been going on for a long time. And they've known about it and they have acquiesced in it and they have actually encouraged it. Now there's a backlash. There's just too many. Again, the numbers are too large. It's happened too quickly. So there is a problem here. Uh, the Britain is even funnier. Britain actually, they also participate in what is really a people trafficking racket. They give visas saying, oh, these uh, uh, categories of people we have shortage. I don't know, some bureaucrat in Whitehall writes a memo and that becomes policy next day. And I gave in my article the example of a person I um, who went there as some kind of caregiver. This young lady has no experience in caregiving or nursing. She was a secretary in India. But I don't know how she got some fixer, broker, some middleman, some people trafficker agency. And there's hundreds of them in India, by the way. I'm not taking away from our culpability in this whole process. There's lots of Indian businesses making money out of this racket. So again, numbers have increased very largely in a very concentrated period of time. At one time, 20, 30 years ago, Indian doctors and nurses are helping the NHS. They're helping the British health system. That was the view. Now there's a view that maybe they're just overcrowding the British health system. The numbers matter, speed matters, and the stupidity of these governments. Australia is very similar to Canada. It's not as bad as Canada, because I don't think the Australian visa officials in Delhi, in their embassy, are as left wing as the Canadian ones. So, but they also have a lot of colleges, a lot of fly by night stuff, a lot of people pretending to go as students and becoming residents. So that's on the legal side. That these countries have had, particularly in the last few decades, extremely foolish immigration systems. And a lot of people from a lot of countries have gamed this. But we are a 1.5 billion, we are one of the biggest, most highly populated countries in the world. So if you have, um, five um, agencies or people trafficking businesses or visa agents or immigration advisors in Thailand, you'll have 500 in India because we're a big country, lots of people. And yes, people will always like to migrate from a poorer country to a richer country, from a lower wage country to a higher wage country. That's inevitable. That's the economics of it. But you don't create a situation where you encourage a flood and then don't know what to do about it. That's what they have done. Now let's switch to the illegal side. The illegal side is even more pernicious and funny. You can go to these countries and claim asylum. How anybody in India can claim that they're being persecuted and need asylum really beats me. Uh, we have, I don't know, 26 languages, 20 religions, so many ethnicities. And I don't see any evidence of systemic or systematic persecution of anyone. And any ambassador posted to India from Canada or Britain or US should know that in 10 days' time. Otherwise, he or she is not worth being the ambassador. Even LGBTQ people, our Supreme Court has given them rights. I mean, there's no persecution happening in India. And yet, These countries, you know what they do? They don't even give them asylum. They'll accept an application for asylum, and then it takes them 10, 15 years to adjudicate. In the meantime, that individual continues to live in Canada or Britain. And uh, there's one fellow who's no longer MP, who was MP till recently in India, who has openly said on TV that I take money and give letter to anyone who comes to me and says, give me a letter on the MP's official letterhead that he is being persecuted in India. I mean, so it's not as if US Embassy, Canadian Embassy, British Embassy doesn't know this. They know this. So originally, most of the illegal migrants came from Middle East and Africa and so on. But again, in the last couple of decades, this huge increase in these asylum seekers from India, and they neither reject them nor accept them. They keep their applications pending, but they are in effect immigrants in that country. And then after 10 years, there'll be some human rights lawyer who'll say, yeah, you guys have taken 10 years to decide on this application. Let the person stay here. And some judge will say, yeah, let the person stay here. So this is how they have created this attraction for illegals to go. Otherwise, Indians never went illegally to Britain. They went legally. And in the old days, illegal Indians would be those who overstayed their visas, not people crossing the channel. But now on those channel boats, along with Afghans and Albanians and Syrians and Libyans, there's also a few Indians getting through. Same thing happened in Mexico, in the southern border of the US. You know, they opened it up for 3-4 years. They were letting in millions of people. So suddenly there are a lot of wealthy Indians, because you have to be relatively wealthy. You may not be super wealthy, but to buy an air ticket from India to Spain, Spain to Guatemala, Guatemala to Mexico, and then Mexico through, you have to pay those guys to get you through the border. So there were several hundred of them going through. And they all go there and claim asylum. I mean, the least the US judge who listens to their claim would say, hey, you're from India, go back. No, this is not some Rwanda or Myanmar where there's some civil war going on. You go back. But they don't. They say, yeah, okay, we'll hear your appeal. Come back in a year, come back in 2 years. In the meantime, some of them get driver's licenses. They start getting emergency medical care for free. And they, in fact, I mentioned in my article, in the old days, in India, you could get driver's licenses kind of by fixing the system. Now it's very difficult. We've digitized it completely. There are, again, these same human traffickers. They have rackets and they get driver's licenses, and these guys, without knowing driving, start driving trucks and cabs. And if they kill somebody, which say one guy did, some accident in Florida, it became a major scandal on social media, how an illegal Indian in the US had a driver's license and had an accident in Florida. So these are, so the legal one is bad, the illegal one is worse. So what I'm saying is, while we have a problem of that I started with, large numbers, speed, and success becoming a problem rather than a good thing. These countries, their systems, both on the legal side and the illegal side, need great attention. And until they do that, the travel agents or whatever they call themselves in India and in other countries are going to continue to beat the system both legally and illegally.
So now we have talked about numbers, success, and the speed with which the numbers are rising. So these three things, according to you, are working against the diaspora basically. So to conclude, what is the way forward for the diaspora? I mean, if they can, what they should do?
It's very difficult. You know, there's a beautiful YouTube thing where a Jewish guy asked the great economist Thomas Sowell, what should we do to reduce anti-Semitism? And Thomas Sowell says, maybe you Jews should be a little less successful. So, and obviously, you're not going to tell an Indian who's appointed as CEO of a company, don't take that
Don't
job.
be successful.
That's not going to work. Um, it's going to be. I think we have to realize the next 5-10 years we're going to face these problems. The diaspora will face. There will be adjustments, but as I said, anything. See, if we had migrated to US over 50 years, 60 years, 100 years, it would not have mattered even if the numbers were 5 or 6 million. But when you do it in a few decades, over time it will get sorted out. Certainly, Canada and US are immigrant societies. They will get sorted out. And more evidence will come out that these are law abiding people by and large. They are not violent, they're tax paying. And all those 20-year ago stories will start slowly floating up to the surface. I think UK may be a little more difficult because there the issue might be how the Britons of Indian origin managed to differentiate themselves from British people of Pakistani origin. And so that I think that's going to be a tough one, but they'll have to do that because the Britain has this other kind of wrinkle to their problems. But diasporas or migrations are never easy. What I didn't cover in my article, but I'd like to share with you, is an interesting thing. Some 20 years ago, not today, 20 years ago, maybe even more, 22 years ago, I was running an IT company in Bangalore. And my HR head said, come, you have to come for this function. You are the chief guest. It was a function of the Orissa Cultural Forum of Bangalore. And they were doing some Odissi dances and so on. And I sat in the front row and all that. So then I nudged my HR guy. I said, what am I doing here? What do I have to do with this? He said, you don't understand. We employ about 200 software programmers from Odisha in our company. And we are the sponsors of this. This is part of our outreach to our employees. Now, if you go back 100 years, talented, ambitious Odisha people went to Calcutta. That was where the action was. That was where the wage rates were high, where economic growth was high. Today, nobody goes to Calcutta. In fact, people in Calcutta are leaving Calcutta. Everybody goes to Bangalore. So sometimes these things happen in kind of strange ways. And US, I'm very sanguine about because they've absorbed Irish, they've absorbed Italian. Yeah, it is true. Skin color, race-wise, Indians are not the same as whites. And most Indians are not Christians. Those are problems. But many there are elements in American society who see themselves as a basically white Christian society. So, but nevertheless, I think it can be done. Canada, because it's got basically a string of incompetent governments. I'm not optimistic about Canada getting its act together. Britain, I think the challenge is with the Indians there, or people of Indian origin there, to see how they have to sell this story of their being different and integrating more, probably more intermarriages, more things like that, that will make their thing easier. But I wish all these four countries change both their legal migration systems and their illegal, and put an end to this illegal migration, asylum seeking, all this bogus stuff. They just have to do it. Uh, and I hope they do it. And I hope in doing it, they don't become inhumane. They don't become, um, they shouldn't become a caricature of themselves. They should be, they should do it sensibly. But it's tough. 20, 30 years of mistakes, it's tough to change. But let's hope they do it. And if they can move towards the market, that's why even though $100,000 a year and the sudden announcement did shock all of us, I thought back about it and I said, at least it's a movement towards merit and market. It's better than lottery. And therefore, we should say, hey, this is not a bad idea. It could be improved. As I said, you could have a proper reverse auction. But there are ways to deal with it, I think, both in the host countries and here. I also wrote a previous article for the print where I said we can also use this as an opportunity to attract people back, to set up startup parks in India, where many of these people can come back and set up techno startups and things like that. Uh, so a little bit of rebalancing and getting some of these people back to India won't necessarily be a bad thing for us. It might be actually helpful in further developing and enhancing our human capital base. Uh, Diasporas are problems, my friend, and they have always been problems. But I think right now, over time, we have to give it time for this problem to get sorted out. It's not going to get sorted out by actions and hopefully some improvements in the governments and the administrations of the host countries.
So thank you so much, Mr. Rao. That was very, very insightful.
Thank you. Thank you.